Welcome, Sam, to the Empathy Edge podcast. I was just telling you before we started recording that this episode is not just a balm for my soul, but I think something that everyone needs to hear right now in the current political climate that we're in, and the role of empathy to help us be activists in our own comfort level, in our own way, shape, or form. So, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
So, as we do with all my guests, I would love to hear a little bit. We would all love to hear a little bit about your story and how you even got to this work, because I know that there's an interesting turn you took, as folks heard in the bio, from a symphony musician to then an anti-poverty lobbyist. So,
Yeah.
tell us about that journey and how you got here, and
Yes.
now the author of Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. Tell us how you got here.
So, what I use to tell my story, and I tell it all the time, is a thing called the story of self, developed by Harvard professor Marshall Gans. And it basically asks, what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment? So, I always say, when I'm telling my story, what happened in your life and what decisions have you made to get to this podcast, for one? So here's mine. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music, and I played percussion in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught
Wow.
high school music. And 45 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby. Results. A lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? When I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964, and the assassination of U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, it's now 1977. I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I'm thinking, well, it's inevitable because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away there's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health, literacy. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will
Mm.
just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own. And my questions, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classrooms, read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will to end hunger. And so I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you wrote them. I don't want to know if you met, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, 200, fewer than 3%, could answer correctly. 6,800, over 97%, could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the
Wow.
other. And let me just add, these high school students are in their 60s now.
Oh, wow.
And so I always say, I had a front row seat on the American Slumber Party and by my little poll back in 1978 and
Hmm.
79.
Wow. And what do you mean by the American Slumber Party?
Well, let me say it a different way. In the last election in November 2025, in New York City, Zoran Mamdani was elected. It was the largest voter turnout in since 1969, and 58% of registered New York voters didn't vote.
Hmm.
And we should rightfully celebrate that it was the largest turnout since 1969, and
Yeah.
still.
And still, it's
That's
less
my,
than
yeah.
50%. Yeah.
And a little more recently, in December 2025, there was a new mayor from Miami. It's the first Democrat elected in 30 years, and the voter turnout was 21%.
Oh,
That's the American Slumber Party. And
indeed.
yes, and so anyway, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I mean it's a travesty to me when we think about the sacrifices and people literally putting their lives on the line to get us the right to vote in this country and the fact that people don't go. And I know a lot of it is people feel jaded. They feel that it's voter apathy. They feel that it doesn't matter. The system is rigged or, my one vote won't matter. But I often think to myself, do we need to become a country where it's compulsory? Like where we're making everybody vote, but that just seems so
Yeah,
antithetical to democracy,
yeah,
to really getting people to activate and understand the part they play in the larger fabric
yeah,
of everything that's
yeah,
going on. And that's
yeah,
really, the work of empathy and compassion is sort of being self-aware that it's not just about you. There are other people and that you are part of a community and you're part of an ecosystem and you don't always have all the right answers. And
yeah.
so, really getting together and forming that collective. So, I want to talk about your book, Reclaiming Our Democracy. Now, this is actually a rewrite, a revision from a
Right.
book that you wrote 30 years ago. So, why were you compelled to update it and release it in the past year?
Well, I want to tell the story. I was interviewed in early 2024 when the hardback came out on a national NPR program, goes to 350 stations, and I was totally blown away by how vulnerable the host was. And I have it memorized. I'm going to repeat his question to me, and then my response. He said, "The passive nature to our politics today, you can feel beat down by it. This is national radio. You can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel beat down by it. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What is the way out of that?" I was so blown away by his vulnerability
Yeah.
in that question. The first thing I said was, well, Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, "We aren't passengers on spaceship Earth, we're the crew."
Hmm.
Well, are we? And if we're crew, how does crew operate? And the second thing I said was futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen said, "In fact, these days, cynicism is obedience." Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things, I'm not going to do anything. Why would I if nothing I do makes a difference? If I could add one more that I didn't know at the time, I've since met this professor at Stanford, Jamil Zaki, who
Yes.
wrote a book
Familiar with
titled
his work. Hmm.
Hope for Cynics, The
Hmm.
Surprising Science of Human Goodness. I love that
Hmm.
title. And in the book, he says, well, if you're cynical, it's like you're playing poker and you fold your hand before the game even starts.
Yeah.
Well, if we're civic cynics, it's kind of like we fold our hand before the Congress is sworn in, before the first bill is introduced.
Hmm.
So it was a great, that's my, that interview was like in my face reason why I wanted to have the book rewritten and updated
Yes.
and re-released.
Yes. And your main idea and your main focus is around transformational advocacy. So what is that? And give us an example from your book because, we're going to connect the dots for folks here about how this links to strengthening your empathy and why empathy is required not only to navigate change, but to navigate disagreement and navigate conflict in a constructive way. So tell us what you mean by transformational advocacy.
Okay, great. So I'm going to tell what it's not. It's not transactional advocacy. Sign the petition,
And be done with it.
transaction complete.
Hmm.
Transformational advocacy is where you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate that you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of Congress and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do those kinds of things, you see yourself differently. That's
Hmm.
the transformation and who you see yourself to be. And an example. Let me see if I can remember this one great quote from her. I'm going to tell the story of Ellie Sparks. She was a volunteer when she told me this story with Citizens Climate Lobby. Now she's on staff. She said when she joined CCL, she was suffering from what she called climate trauma. She
Hmm.
would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and she would weep at home and she
Hmm.
would weep at work. And then she joined Citizens Climate Lobby and she gets trained and she meets, and there's this one spate of 4 days where she meets with 20 congressional offices. And this is what she said, and this is the transformational part. She said, going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love, releasing fear and centering in love. This is sacred and profound work. End of quote.
Mm.
Well, she started at climate trauma and she ended at sacred and profound.
Right.
That is that transformation
Right.
from who she really saw herself to be in the
Right.
matter.
Well, and it's amazing what happens when you empower people in big and small ways is it
Yeah,
changes their self-view. It changes their ability to think they can't to they can. And we
yes,
see it in the workplace all the time with workers who are not trusted. You know, they're told what to do and it's like, okay, I'm just going to do this and I'm not going to be engaged because maybe this is all I'm meant for versus workers who are like, hey, what's the goal? You figure it out. What are your ideas? What are your innovations?
yeah,
And how people light up when you give them the opportunity to be heard, when you give them the opportunity to see themselves in a different way. I feel we lose so much potential of so many human beings when we put them in environments where they feel they have no option, no say, no autocracy.
well, if I could add this, in the nonprofit volunteer world,
Hmm.
I'm going to tell a story where it's a little even worse than that.
Yeah.
I was talking to the head of organizing for a very large, every one of your viewers and listeners would
Hmm.
know the name of this organization, which I'm not going to say. And the head of organizing said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Protecting their brand was more important
Wow.
than training their members. And I always say, well, one of the groups I coach, I mentioned earlier, Citizens Climate Lobby, the year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds, and editorials published.
Hmm.
In 2019, one group was saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization.
Yeah.
Citizens Climate Lobby is saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right?
Right.
We give that
Yes.
to them. And as a result, they had those 4,300 published pieces.
This is very
So,
similar. I do some work with Moms Demand Action around common sense gun safety and
right.
against gun violence. And I attended
Yes.
for the first time an advocacy day at the California State Capitol last March. It was so empowering to be there and to be in those offices and just the numbers, just the strength in numbers of showing up. And they train the volunteers that are the team leads. So you're put on a team and you go to a few offices with that team and there's a lead there that's guiding the conversation. Those people are trained by the organization. They're not political lobbyists. They're not, in this world. They're moms, they're women, they're people that have been impacted by gun violence.
They're
And
us.
yeah, they're us. And then the organization says, we'll train you on how to run this, what to say. But they always stress the most important thing is you share your story.
Hmm.
You share why you're there.
Hmm.
That's going to matter more than
Right.
any list of
Right.
talking points that we have
Right.
because they already know we're there to support,
Yeah.
to ask them to support a certain bit of legislation.
Yeah.
What they can't replicate is the individual stories that will maybe touch that lawmaker in a way where they can be moved to action
Yeah.
and they have the faith and the trust in the people that are volunteering without having to vet them necessarily without it's just like, hey, I just showed up, they didn't know me, and they're like, share why you're here, why are you even involved with this organization,
Why
share
do you
that with the
care?
lawmaker.
Yeah.
And I
Why do
just
you
thought that
care?
was such a
What does this mean to you?
exactly, and I just
Yeah.
thought that was such a great way to proliferate evangelism
Mhm.
and also to create empathy of just tell your personal story about what this means to you and let them see you as a person,
Yeah.
not a quote unquote activist, not a rabble rouser, not,
Yeah.
an annoyance in their day,
Yeah.
but as an actual person.
Brilliant. Maybe I could just let your audience know when I'm talking to a group, and in mid-December of 2025, I did my 124th in-person or Zoom talk, not counting this kind of podcast. I always say, look for three things if you're looking for an organization that's working to deliver transformational advocacy. One, recruitment and community building. The organization brings new people in, not just to build an e-blast list, but to form them into local chapters so you're not working alone. And the community building might include a monthly whole of organization webinar with guest speakers and Q&A and inspiration. So recruitment and community building too, what you were just talking about, training. How do you get the meeting with the elected? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? Two, training. Three, the organization encourages breakthroughs, encourages you to move out of your comfort zone and do because that's where confidence comes from when
Mm-hmm.
you're encouraged to do things you didn't think you could do. And in the book, there's this drawing. On one side, there's a small circle labeled your comfort zone, and next to it is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're looking for an organization, like you mentioned, Moms Demand Action, that's not kicking you out, encouraging you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens.
For sure, for sure. And, obviously you've talked before and in the book about how we're talking about transformational advocacy and how it transforms the volunteers that are associated with these different causes. So what are some of the issues that results, the organization that you created and other groups have worked on? What have been some of the issues that have been improved
Right.
by this kind of
Yeah.
transformational advocacy? And I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot. So maybe just highlight one or two.
I'm going to give it one example is Results has worked for 41 years
Hmm.
on child survival globally, where the UN Children's Fund UNICEF was reporting 40,000 child deaths a day around the world in 1983. And now we've worked for 41 years, it's fallen by 66%, the
Hmm.
global child death rate. Now, our current president and Elon Musk brought a chainsaw to some of that work. But I want to tell folks about one example of a glimmer of hope for the fiscal year 2026, which is the bulk of the year 2026. Maternal and child health was funded at $915 million, and President Trump called for a 92% cut to 85 million. Well, the House Appropriations Committee, not the Democrat, the House Appropriations Committee appropriated the full $915 million.
Hmm.
That's because citizens have spent years and decades educating their members of Congress on that.
Hmm.
And now it goes to the Senate and et cetera. But I'll tell you one other. One of the groups I'm coaching is the United Church of Christ Climate Hope Affiliates, and they're
Hmm.
working on the Environmental Protection Agency. Well, the
Hmm.
president called for a 55% cut to
Hmm.
the Environmental Protection Agency for 2026.
Hmm.
And the House called for a 23% cut, and the Senate called for a 5% cut. Now, most of us don't know about that. Actually, this organization I mentioned,
Hmm.
they're they only started in 2025, so they only have 11 chapters. So they're mostly writing letters to the editor,
Hmm.
urging the public to call their members of Congress and
Right.
push for no cut or the 5%,
Right.
not the president's 50. So those are examples
Hmm.
of not only change that we can make, but
Hmm.
some of the groups and the changes they're working on making uh,
Mm.
these kinds of issues.
It's so heartening because we want to encourage participation by showing progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes the progress is immediate, sometimes it takes a little longer. And I just want to talk about, the role of empathy in this work to me is obvious. This idea of getting together, seeing other perspectives so that we can find common ground and influence our lawmakers in whatever advocacy we choose to support. So when you're coaching volunteers who are meeting with an elected official who opposes a bill maybe that they support, you have them ask three questions.
Yep.
And can you share what those questions are, why they're important,
Yep.
and an example of why they work?
Yes, these are our curiosity questions.
Okay.
These are our deep listening questions. So I'm coaching a group. They're going to go meet with a member of Congress who opposes their bill. Question number one, we know you don't support this bill. What would it take to change your mind? And you're listening for assignments. I'll tell a little story in a moment. What would it take to change your mind? Two, could you say more about that? Three, why do you think that is? And it's basically a deep listening exercise.
Yeah.
I have a friend in Pennsylvania, and it's years ago. He was going down to Florida. He wanted to start a House Climate Solutions Caucus, Democrats and Republicans. And he was meeting with a Republican, and he said, what would it take to change your mind? And she said, well, if you could get the chambers of commerce on board. There's his assignment. And he did. He got letters from the presidents of the Miami Beach, Coral Gables, North Chambers of Commerce. He comes back with the letters of support. And the congresswoman says, well, if you could get the mayors on board, here's his compassionate action, because he's listening to what she's, and he did. Miami Beach, North Miami, Coral Gables. He comes back with letters from these mayors. And so that's an example of curiosity. What is it on their side of the conversation that they need?
Yeah.
And then his compassion and action, doing something about what they said would help change things. And so, yeah, it's quite astounding. And I'll just say that when it was started in 2016, grew to 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. President Trump was elected the first time, and it fell to 6 and 6 because it was Noah's Ark. Oh, a Democrat would only come on with a Republican. It grew to 6 and 6 because some had been defeated or retired. At the end of the second year of President Trump's first term, it had grown to 45 Republicans and 45 Democrats.
And this is what group?
Well, this was the House Climate Solutions Caucus.
Got it.
Members of the House of Representatives. Now, some of this was whitewashing, but some folks were serious, these members of the House of Representatives. And yeah, it's basically a story of kind of doing the early spade work.
Right.
When no one thought it was possible.
Right. Well, we're never going to cut through by shaming and blaming.
Right.
Which feels good in the moment to feel, self-righteous and attack a lawmaker that you don't agree with, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And so, I write my lawmaker a lot about different issues. And I've also written, he's done something I agree with. And I've said, I know I often write you when I'm not happy with something, but I'm happy with this. Like, this was a great move. Thank you. And remembering that, yes, whatever, some of them are motivated by greed. Some of them are motivated by their party. And maybe they don't have, and both sides of the aisle, let me just be clear. Maybe they don't have a moral center, but most people do. Most people get into public service. No one would want that life unless they were committed. And again, we know that different people have different motivations, but if we can remember to treat them with respect and as a human being, like you were saying earlier, and those curiosity questions, again, empathy does not have to mean you agree with someone. It just means you make space to actually hear them out and listen to their point of view so that you maybe can find common ground. Like, to your point, what's stopping you? Well, what's stopping me is I don't want to make enemies of the chambers of commerce. So I need to get them on board. Great. Let me find a way to get them on board, right? So you have a much more productive conversation. And whether you're in the workplace or you're dealing with government, it's human dynamics of just getting curious about that other point of view.
Let me tell this other story in this whole scheme of things. In September 2025, the 25 volunteers with Citizens Climate Lobby had a 3.5-hour hike with their Republican Senator, John Curtis, who took Mitt Romney's seat in the Senate. And it
Hmm.
started in 2017 when he was a first year House member, and he announced an 8 hour town hall meeting hike. And 8 people showed up, 6 from this Citizens Climate Lobby. And the
Uh-huh.
next year, again, it was a great turnout. I don't know that I could do an 8 hour hike, but anyway, uh,
Yeah,
and
not
he
accessible
offered
to
them
everyone,
their
but yeah.
own personal hike. And on the first hike, someone said, "What are you going to do about carbon?" And he said, "I thought, well, I was the mayor of Provo, Utah. I never thought about carbon." And, and he said, because they didn't attack me. And
Right.
they just like, I would take a baby step and they would, recognize that, etc. A couple of years later, he founded the Conservative Climate Caucus in the
Hmm.
House of Representatives.
Hmm.
In the end of 2024, that Congress, and then he went to the Senate, there were 87 Republicans in the Conservative Climate Caucus. He asked a few,
Right.
some of them BS, but some of them serious.
Right.
And
Right.
we need to, I just was, and I'll add this, that hike was just miles, 6 miles from where Charlie Kirk was murdered on that campus. And
Mm.
so here you have 25 volunteers hiking with their Republican senator for 3.5 hours.
Right.
And then you have the heinous crime 6 miles away within weeks of each
Wow.
other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one gives me hope,
Yeah. And one is a
and
cautionary
one
tale. Yeah,
is not the way
exactly.
we want to go.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, last question I have for you is that you often say that if you want transformational advocacy to work, organizations and their staff have to get over their fear of making big asks of volunteers. What do you mean by that?
Well, let me say it this way. When I'm coaching an organization to start a chapter, let's say there are 20 people in the room and 10 raise their hand to be in the new chapter, they start with a 4 part new group training every week for 4 weeks for 90 minutes of training.
Uh-huh.
If it's a new staffer, they're going to, oh, no one's going to agree to 4 part new group training. That's asking a lot of people. I'll just water it down or kind of slough over the
Yeah.
ask. No,
Yeah.
you need to make big asks of volunteers. And yeah, I just got an email in the last couple of days. This group that I'd mentioned just started their first 11 chapters.
Hmm.
And this one chapter in Michigan, their congressional office had been shut down because of vandalism to the outside. And they
Oh,
had a meeting with the chief of staff, and they were only going to be informed where the meeting would be a few hours before. And they worried, would this really even happen? And
right.
then they meet with the chief of staff in the district office, and they're blown away. He keeps them for an hour. He wants their input, and this is in an office that so many others thought they don't respond, they don't pay attention,
Right.
they're not responsive. Well, yeah, but they had this 4 part new group training, and they learned how to get the meeting, and they
Yeah.
learned how to practice for the meeting, and
Right.
and it just shifted things for them.
And
Um,
I think that's like the call to action and anything actionable you can share with us about how can listeners who do want to get involved, but they don't know what groups offer
yeah,
good training, what groups have those
sure.
4 points that you
Yes,
mentioned.
yes, yes. Yeah,
And obviously they want to get involved with causes they care about. But I
right,
know people are often like, I don't know where to
right.
go. I don't know what to do.
Yes,
I don't,
yes,
so can you give us some
yes.
action
And I
oriented
describe them as
ways?
groups that will feed you power.
Yes.
And if people go to my website, reclaimingourdemocracy.com, and
Mm-hmm.
on the homepage of reclaimingourdemocracy.com is a button to learn more. It's really a sign up sheet, and you can let me know that you would like me to connect you with any one of 5 different groups. And I urge you to pick one, not 5. It gets a
Right.
little complicated that way.
Right.
And if you go to reclaimingourdemocracy.com and click on learn more, you're going to then let me know you'd like to be connected with this group or that group, or
Okay.
if you'd like me to speak to your club or whatever.
I love
Um,
that. I
yeah,
love that. And
yeah.
we should just add, because I do have an international audience. We should add, we're talking about the United States. Do you do any
Yes.
work out
Some of
with
these groups are
organizations
in
outside?
Canada, and Britain, and
Okay.
elsewhere. So there's some other possibilities.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
Sam, this has been so heartening to me and so a little spark of optimism and hopefulness in what are some dark times right now. And it all comes back to the way that we relate to each other as human beings and how we can leverage empathy and making sure that we're coming into things with a assuming positive intent and not having so much of our own stuff or maybe our own bad past experiences with advocacy get in the way of moving forward with advocacy where we are now. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. I usually ask at this point because we're going to put all the links to what you talked about in the show notes, as well as your book, which again, the name of the book is Reclaiming Our Democracy, Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy, um, which was named an editor's pick by Publishers Weekly, by the way. But we'll put a link to that. But I know you have already shared with us that the best place to go is to go to Reclaiming Our Democracy. If you're interested in getting involved, click that Learn More button, and Sam will connect you with an organization that you can feel good about and be empowered by. So thank you for your insights. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. It's a thrill to talk with you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Please rate, review, and share it with a friend or a colleague. And until next time, please remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.